Good afternoon, everyone. Safi Russell from SDR Consulting here. Welcome to Basic Business Friday. A little bit about myself. I'm a CPA, going on my 20th year in the industry, and SDR Consulting Inc. is a virtual firm that focuses on business startups and business cleanups. Business Basic Friday is about providing value to small business owners with various topics from guest speakers in the industry. And so today, it's a pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. And Terrell, if you're ready. Terrell, sorry. So our guest speaker for today is Terrell Turner, CPA, and he's going to be discussing preparing your business for growth. So Terrell, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. So just to give you a little bit of context for everyone, my background is accounting and finance. I probably started off like a lot of accountants where, studied accounting, went the route of working in public accounting, doing a lot of technical accounting and audit. And I decided to leave that and really move into industrial, manufacturing, working for Fortune 500 companies. And it was there where I started doing more finance, kind of corporate finance. So really helping the non-finance teams, like the engineers, the sales teams, the operations team, kind of really understand, all right, now that we have the financial statements or the financial information, what do you actually do to actually make decisions and really grow the business? And from there, did several different roles. And I think probably the most pivotal one was when I worked in investor relations. So it was, at the time, the company was $14 billion. And my job was, I guess maybe the best way to put it is, I was a ghostwriter for the executives. So whenever they had their meetings with Wall Street analysts, like if any of you have ever seen like the MSNBC, or you've seen the business news, or where they're talking about stocks and updates. And so what my job was is to write out what the executives were going to say, what the CEO and his staff were going to say, what they were going to talk about, how they would answer questions, and do research on the company to make sure that I understood the numbers so I can point them in the right direction. As well as when we had meetings where we had investors from around the world coming in. Usually the investors were anywhere, they were managing something north of 250 million in an investment portfolio, where they came in for special meetings. So really sitting with the teams and helping prepare the executives for that. And what it really helped me understand is that there's a lot of different things that go into the financials. And I think there's a lot of things that a lot of businesses that are starting out can learn from that picture of, maybe you're not there yet, or maybe that's not your goal to get to that point. But a lot of the things that I learned in that phase, it really helped me take a step back to start now. I work with a lot of smaller to medium-sized businesses, is helping make sure that they have, the right things in place. So as they continue to grow, they don't run into some of the problems we had to troubleshoot at some of the larger companies. Because one of the things that I realized that a lot of people kind of have some challenges with at times is, when you're building a business, there are some things that you just think about where you're in the beginning stages, where you're really just focused on what's right in front of you. But when you take a step back and you're able to think, let's say, 2 steps ahead or 3 steps down the road, you'll start to notice that some of the things that you may be doing in the beginning just to survive or just to get started, it is actually setting you up for some challenges, down the road. Let's say, 6 months to a year down the road, you're going to run into an issue. And so a couple of things that I wanted to definitely point some attention to of where I really saw a lot of the problems we were dealing at the bigger, I guess you say, the bigger levels, but they were problems that were started by something we were doing when things were much smaller, and in some areas of the business when things were just starting. And just over time, as the business grew, the problem just got bigger. And in some of those areas, the problem got so big that, we either had to do a massive revamp, or some of the problems actually couldn't get solved. So we had to take some drastic actions that a lot of businesses probably would not want to put themselves in that position. So one of the ways that I tell a lot of small businesses and medium-sized businesses is one of the things, the first questions that I think we have to answer as a entrepreneur and as a business owner is really looking at when you are starting a business, is kind of what is the real goal of this business? Because if you don't really clarify what's the goal of the business, what that tends to do is it tends to create some issues down the line. And some of those issues, some of those, reasons, may sound superficial, or some of them may have some deep meaning to them. And one of the things that I tell a lot of business owners as I do different coaching or different conversations with business owners is that it really doesn't, like, there is no right or wrong answer as to why you want to do your business. But whatever it is, we have to be honest about it. And if we're honest about that, then we can craft a strategy on what this business should look like. And one of the I'll say a couple of the conversations I think back to, because I also, in running my own accounting practice, I also host a podcast. And over the last 20 months, we have interviewed over 400 entrepreneurs and business owners from around the world on the show, and talking to them about how they started their business and talking about why they started in. And what I found to be a common trait with a lot of the businesses is, when they started, they said, we started with this very, very idealistic vision of, hey, it was a personal passion drive. But as they were building the business, what they realized is they said, I really don't want to build it for that. What I really want to do is I want to build this so I can sell it in 7 years. And that became good for us to know, because then you can take a step back and you can actually craft a strategy that allows you to achieve that. And so some of the common reasons that I've seen a lot of people talk about, why they wanted to build a business was, some of them wanted the bragging rights of building a business. So they got into a trendy business that they could, grow really fast. The thing about a trendy business is that it's not going to be around forever. I think back to some of the business owners that got into the drop shipping business. I think a couple of years ago, when fidget spinners were a very popular thing, there were some people that I was aware of that created an entire business around selling fidget spinners. And for many of them, they did millions in sales. But one of the things that they knew is this is a fad product. This business is all about selling this product, and it may last for a year, it may last for 2 years, but knowing that they were able to kind of have a better strategy and think through, okay, all right, if I know I only want to be in this business for 1 to 2 years, how would I then approach it? Now, on the other hand, there are some people who say, hey, you know what? I want to build this business because I want to grow it, and then I want to be able to sell it so that I can buy other assets that I can invest in. And when it comes down to that, one of the things that I tell a lot of people is, well, we definitely need to make sure that your accounting is clean, because if you're trying to sell your business to someone else, they're going to have a lot of questions. They want to be able to see, they want to actually be able to see clear financial information. They want to be able to understand what's going on. And the thing is, if you're not working with an accountant or a bookkeeper or someone that can help you keep that organized, when it is time for you to sell that business, you're probably not going to get the price that you want for that business, because if the financials are very unclear and your buyer's looking at it, they're like, well, I don't think your business is worth X, so I'm going to offer you Y. But I think that as business owners, if you understand, like, hey, I really want to just flip this business. And part of, because probably one of the examples that a lot of us are probably very familiar with is when people buy a house that they want to flip. And I think back to when my wife and I were years ago, when we got into investing in real estate properties. One of the conversations that we had about there was a property we were looking at that we were as a potential flip. And when we were going through the property, we we're looking at it with our contractors, and we were looking at it with our realtor. And there were all these different things my wife was bringing up. It was like, oh, we can do this, we can do this. And I had to step back and said, hey, dear, remember, we are not buying this house because we want to live in it. We are buying this house because we want to fix it up and we want to sell it for a profit, because the perspective is a little bit different. Now, when we bought our personal home, there were different things we went through where she said, hey, I want this to be here. I want this to be here. And I'm like, okay, all right. I don't think that's going to add a ton of value to the home, but this is the home we're going to live in. We plan on being here for a while. So I think that's perfectly fine. We'll spend the money on those type of things. And I think the similar thing happens in your business. When you think about your business, if you want to actually exit your business, let's say 7, 8 years, or let's say, you're like, hey, I love my business, but I would like to retire. You want to start thinking about like, hey, how do we get the financial and the accounting side of the business cleaned up so that when we get ready to sell, that we can actually get a price that we really like for this business. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is when it comes down to selling a business, if you have a more traditional business, like me, it's a stable business, or it's a smaller business, typically you're going to get a sales price of, they're going to take your earnings before interest and tax and depreciation. They'll just take that number, multiply it by let's say, 2 or 4 or 5. And that's the price that they want to pay for your business. So as a business owner, one of the things you want to focus on is, okay, how do I make sure that my earnings before interest, tax, and depreciation is as high as possible? Because the higher that number, the bigger price that I'm going to get when I get ready to sell it. And a lot of that comes to working with an accountant, a person who understands finance enough to help you clean up that part of, your business. Now, another reason that I tell people is, you should never discount this reason for why you would want to build a business. And it is, because you have a personal passion for the business or the product or the solution and the problem that you are solving. And some people tend to look at that and say, well, that's not a big deal. But I'm like, if you're a business owner and you're building a business because you have a passion about that problem that you're solving, or you have a passion for the business itself, meaning you have no plans to sell the business. You have no plans of exiting the business. You want to hold it forever. And I say that that's not a bad thing. But if that is the plan that you want to do, we want to make sure that we're clear on that. So as we start building the business and we start putting some processes and things in place, that we keep that in mind. Because if you're going to be working in the business, as long as you own it, or you want to pass it on to, the next generation, there are certain decisions that you probably will or won't make in that situation. And it's clear, or it's better to be clear and understand that. And so once you kind of figure out, hey, why am I doing this? What is it that I really want to get out of this? I think the next part is really just planning for growth. Now, the areas where people tend to struggle the most, or I guess you would say they tend to hurt themselves the most when it comes down to growth, or when it comes down to just running their business, period, where they want to grow, but they don't actually lay out a plan to actually do it. They just say, hey, we want to grow the business. We want the business to be bigger. And so they just go and start taking a bunch of action. Now, I always compare this to, if you were going to take a road trip, and I guess I'm not sure what the age range of everyone that's listening is, but I mean, if you think about, like, when I started driving, it was before smartphones. And when I started driving, my father was in the military. So one of the things that he taught us early on was how to actually read a map. And so either I had to pull out a map, read a map to figure out where I wanted to go, or there was this newer invention that came up called MapQuest, where you can go on MapQuest, you can put in what your starting point was, what your destination, and you could, and then it will map it out as far as like, hey, here's how you get there. Now, it functions similar to a GPS of what we know of today. But when you did it on MapQuest, it wasn't like it was going to be on your phone. You actually printed the instructions off, or you wrote it down by hand if you didn't have a printer, and you only had those instructions. So if you made a wrong turn anywhere in that, in that process, those instructions were no longer that useful for you anymore. And so that's where, I guess you say, navigation systems were back when I started driving. And I didn't have enough money to buy one of the expensive, GPS systems that a lot of, major like trucking companies had. So when it came down to taking a trip, if I wanted to go somewhere that I had never been, I had to make sure that I actually mapped it out and that I actually knew, okay, all right, here's how I'm going to get from where I am to where I want to go. And remember, and my parents and I, we ended up doing that together when I went to the first time they took me to visit a college. We literally went online, we mapped out the trip and said, hey, here are the places we need to go. And not only here's how we get from point A to point B, but here are some of the incremental things that we pass. So if you're reading a map, one of the things you look for are landmarks. So you'll say that, hey, if I want to go from here to here, I know that at some point I'm going to pass this mountain, or at some point I'm going to pass, this long stretch of trees. So as you're going and you're driving on the trip, you're looking for these signals to make sure that you're headed in the right direction. Now, when it comes down to growing a business, what I find is that a lot of people is they don't take time to actually plan out. I want to get from point A to point B. They just say, hey, I want to start a business. I like this product. And they just run in, they get started. And they're like, well, I just want to have a successful business. And what I find is that a lot of people find themselves very, very frustrated because there's no way for them to be able to tell, are you even headed in the right direction? And when I meet with a lot of business owners, one of the questions that I always ask them is, okay, all right, what are we trying to achieve here? Like, what are your sales targets? What profit targets? Like, what are we doing here? And when they don't have a clear answer, that is typically the first sign that, okay, all right, I can understand why you probably are very frustrated. Or if you're not frustrated yet, you're going to do a lot of work. And in about 6 months, we're going to have another conversation and you're going to tell me how frustrated you are in about 6 months. Because anytime that you're trying to build anything, or you're trying to go, from point A to point B, and you don't have clarity on, hey, what direction do I need to head in, then it's going to eventually get very frustrating. And there are a lot of people that I've met that have wanted to start a business, or they say that they started a business, but they ended up just giving up, or they end up quitting the business. And it wasn't necessarily because, hey, the business wasn't a good idea. It's just they didn't have a good plan to approach the business. And so I always say is the planning becomes very, very important. And especially, if you want to grow your business, is you want to kind of plan out that growth. And 3 of the areas that I think that people really, really struggle with when it comes down to planning is, one is on cost. A lot of people that I talk to want to grow their business, but one of the things that they don't factor in is, as your business grows, your costs may grow. For example, if you are a one-person shop and you just started your business and you're doing all the work, and you say, hey, well, we want to bring on more customers. We want to bring on more clients. Well, the question I always ask them is, okay, all right, for you to bring on more clients, what is your capacity? Like, how many clients can you actually support? And then at what point will you need to add more people to your business so that you can actually support those clients? Because what I find is that a lot of people do is they say, okay, all right, well, I'm supporting, 10 clients now, and I want to go to 20. And they forget to factor in, well, at what point do you hit your maximum to where now you need to actually hire somebody else? Now, once you hire somebody else, how much is that person going to cost you? So you can start thinking through, okay, all right, if I have to hire somebody else, how much are they going to cost me? And then all the other things like, do you have to buy them a computer? Do you have to give them an email account? Like, what about the software? I mean, do you need to rent and lease office space, to where you actually start thinking about those things of like, hey, if I do grow, what is my cost going to look like as I continue to grow my business? And because if you don't plan that out, what you run into with a lot of businesses is that you end up growing your business and you find that you're actually making less money with a bigger business than you were when your business was much smaller. And for any business owner that's building a business, that is probably one of the worst feelings to realize, man, I'm working harder now, but making less money. And a lot of that comes down to people not taking the time to plan. Then the second area is definitely on pricing. One of the things that I inevitably find is that most business owners, when you're starting off, they don't know how to create, profitable prices for their products and their services. And you know what? I actually look in the mirror and I point at myself, because I was the same way. I mean, when I first started my business off, and with the accounting and the bookkeeping services that I was offering, some of my, I think for one client, we were doing it for like, $400 a month. And which at the time I was just like, hey, this is my first client, where, I'll be able to show some revenue. But as I started getting smarter about my business and really thinking like, okay, all right, if I'm going to grow the business and I need to take on more clients, like how many clients do I need to take on at $400 a month to be able to hit the amount of money that I want to make? And when I looked at the numbers, I was like, this is not going to work. And I realized that, hey, you know what? I wasn't really pricing my business with the growth and the plan in mind. So I immediately stopped that and said, okay, all right, I will honor my commitment to this customer, because this is the only customer that will get that pricing. But when I started really thinking through and looking at my own numbers and kind of planning the growth, what I said is like, hey, for me to hit this target where I need to go, my price needs to be here. And so we went through a phase during that time of, the price, our pricing, we increased our pricing to I think it was $600 a month. And as we started working with more clients, we started helping them figuring out things. And then in early 2021, our firm was recognized in the New York Times for, the great work that we were doing and helping other businesses. Also during that time, I was recognized as a top 40 under 40 CPA in America. And through going through that, there were more people, and we started, I started becoming a guest speaker at all these different conferences and events. And one of the things that we started realizing is the level of service that our clients were asking from us were a bit more and a bit different, which changed kind of our cost structure. So we had to go back to the pricing and say, okay, all right, based on what customers are asking, now what do our prices need to be? And we started creating different levels of pricing to say, hey, if you just want the basic bookkeeping background detail and we'll email you the reports at the end of the month, it's $600. But if you want some of the other things, to where we have some packages where some clients are paying us like $4,000 a month because they want more meetings, they want more engagement, they want more customized reporting and stuff. And there are some clients that say, hey, well, we want a complete overhaul of our system, where there's some clients that pay us 15 grand a month, to where we really had to look and say, as we grow, how do we think strategically about the pricing? Because one of the things that I tell businesses, although you're starting off now, you want to make sure that you keep in mind that your prices will not stay the same forever. And so you need to make sure that you're looking at your financial information on a regular basis. So, hey, when do we really need to change our prices? I mean, right now we're in that phase of where I'm hiring more staff on. And one of the things that I had to look at is, as my cost changes, what do my prices need to look like to be able to support the people that I need to hire, or the new software, the new technology, the new services that we're offering, and really think strategically about that. And then I think the last point that I wanted to point out for a lot of small businesses and a lot of people that are starting is, most of them fail to actually plan to make a profit. And, this seems so obvious, but it is something that I've seen miss the most. When people are thinking about their business, they're not planning in, okay, how much of a profit do you want to make? Like, for example, let's say if you're selling a product, and let's say the product itself costs you $10 to make. Most people would say, oh, well, if I sell it for $12, then I'll make $2. Well, yes, you'll make $2 in gross margin, but what about all the other costs that you have to cover in your business? How are you going to cover that? And then when they look at all the other costs and they say, well, if all the other costs in your business are like, at $400 a month, or let's say $500 a month, well, how many units do you have to sell at $12 to be able to cover all that cost? And then you also want to say, okay, how much profit do you want to generate in this business? Because you want to also plan your intended profit. And like I said, some of this, you want to kind of, I guess you say, adjust this to be reasonable based on the type of business you have, is to say, okay, how much profit do I want to make in my business? And I always tell people, almost plan your profit target almost like you plan your expenses, and really build that in and start asking yourself questions like, where does my price need to be for me to be able to cover my costs and generate a profit? Or you go and say, okay, how many units or how many clients do I need to be able to cover my costs and be able to generate a profit? Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it is very difficult for anybody to be able to hit a target that you are not aiming for. So when it comes down to thinking about scaling your business, what I always say is that you definitely want to make sure that you are planning for where you want to go, planning for where you want your business to be financially. And then in that, as I said with, the original example about taking a road trip, one of the things that I learned that my father taught me from his military training in reading a map is, at some point, you're going to get a little turned around. And at some point, you do kind of get off track. So one of the things that you do to make sure that you can find your way back to the original plan is you start actually having landmarks. So you know that, hey, at certain point in the journey, the mountain was supposed to be on the left side. And if you find that, hey, the mountain is not on your left side, then you just kind of start to adjust until you get back to the plan that you needed to be on. And when it comes down to a business, your financial statements are the thing that's going to help you get back on track, because your business will not go exactly as you plan it. There will be some deviation. There will be some changes. But as you are looking at the financial statements in your business, what that will do is it'll help you understand, where do we need to make adjustments so we can get the business back on track? Like, hey, is there something we need to tweak in the area of cost? Is there something we need to tweak on the pricing? Is there something we need to tweak on, with the volume? I know for me personally, one of the things we looked at with my business is when we started realizing that, hey, we needed to make some tweaks on the actual products that we offer, to where we had to actually come up with different versions of our service, so that there were some people who just wanted basic bookkeeping. There were some people who needed us to be more engaged. They needed us to actually be more involved with their team, which meant like, hey, we need to come up with separate pricing for that so that people can get what they need, but also at the same time, we don't lose track of our financial objectives within our business. And so I think that for any business that is starting out, you may be thinking like, okay, how do I use all this stuff that you said, Terrell? How do I use it? I think the first thing you do is you really clarify, why do you want to start this business? The next thing is you come back and you say, okay, all right, now I know why I want to start this business. Okay, then it's, how do I make sure that I am working with, either is getting with a bookkeeper or an accountant to help me set things up? Or if you've already started, how do I get with a bookkeeper or an accountant to help me clean up what I have? And then asking them to help you, hey, what are the signs and the numbers that I should be paying attention to make sure that my business is headed in the right direction? Because there are going to be a ton of things that you need to manage, you need to deal with. And your financials are going to become that tool that help you kind of navigate to make sure that you're headed in the right direction. So I hope that is very helpful for you guys, and really kind of breaking it down to simple things that you can do and people that you can look out to work for to really help you navigate that part of your journey.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Terrell. Wealth of information, years of experience, we can definitely tell. And I think that that map example was perfect, because a lot of people do just jump in with no plan of action because, everyone's different personalities too. So there's people who's going to be more spontaneous and then we have the more planners. But when it comes to business, you got to kind of put on that planning hat, definitely. And so we did have a quick question I wanted to raise, and then we'll chat a little bit more. But Tiffany on Facebook had a question about if you have a small business that the revenue maybe is $6,000 or less, do you need to file business taxes? So if you want to take that, you can, or I can. It's up to you.
Well, so I will say, Tiffany, I don't specialize in taxes. So I probably would not be the best one to answer that one.
Okay, perfect. So Tiffany, yes, you do. We'll simplify that. If you're in business for yourself, you should be claiming all income and expenses regardless of the amount. You may end up having expenses to offset that revenue and your profit will be lower, so you'll pay less taxes, or you could even have a loss. But you definitely want to make sure you're reporting all that income and expenses because eventually, as I'm sure everyone knows about the new thresholds for the 1099 reporting and so on, those numbers may be reported to the IRS. And so you want to definitely make sure you're reporting that. So definitely as far as how to file those taxes, it's going to depend on your business structure. So you can definitely feel free, Tiffany, to connect with me and set up a 15-minute intro call, but to get help. And I'll provide my information at the end how to do that. But different entity types file different types of tax returns. And so if you're not sure what you need to file, you definitely want to connect with a professional. We can definitely assist with that here at SDR Consulting, but definitely don't do it alone. I'll put it like that because I've seen people make mistakes for years and then have to clean it up at the end. Okay. All right.
And one thing I'll say on that also strategically is that, what a lot of people ran into this year, because I got several calls from the SBA to help out with some of the special programs they were doing for entrepreneurs this year. And one of the things we were running into is a lot of people, they felt like, hey, my income is too low. They didn't file a tax return. And so when they were trying to apply for like special programs or grant programs, because they didn't have a tax return on file, they were disqualified from being able to do that. So you also want to keep that in mind too, is that, just having the records and having it on file is a good business practice. Plus, it could also be the deciding factor on whether or not you qualify for some future grant programs that may come up.
Absolutely. So many people were bombarding accountants at that time because they saw the funds available, but they didn't have the financials. They didn't have the tax returns. They didn't have the bookkeeping. And that's why it's always good to be ready. You don't have to get ready if you're ready already. So now's the time. We're in a new year. The great thing about what we do here is, business startup and business cleanup services. So whether you started and need to get on track and clean things up, or if you're about to start, now's the time to do the planning, get with your professionals, get the consultations in place. That's one of the things we specialize in. And Terrell actually has a great library of resources as well that I'll have him share at the end. So get the support, get credible resources, not just Google, nothing against Google, but it's a search engine. It's not for research. So it could be a starting point, but you want to definitely get credible resources and connect with a professional where possible. All right. So we're going to check for any other questions. If not, we will wrap up. And she mentioned she just started her business 2 years ago. Congratulations, Tiffany. So, 2 years is never too late to get back on track. And if you need to catch up on past filings, I recommend to do that. So we'll definitely connect. And so, one of the key things you mentioned, Terrell, was really the planning, and in understanding the future direction of your business. If you're going to have investors or if you're going to sell, there may be certain structuring that you want to do differently than if it's just going to be your business forever. If you do want to pass it on, there's certain things you need to have in place to be able to do that, or the business will die with you. So there was a great suggestion about knowing what your future plans are and the goal for your business. And, you may not know that in the beginning, maybe you'll figure it out along the way, but there are certain things you're going to want to do for tax purposes, for estate purposes, for legacy, and profitability that come with those decisions. So that's great that you have that experience in the finance world to really, take that outside view in. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because I do think, in a lot of the interviews that I did on my podcast, or several people that I talked to, that they were on like their third business, and they said, what, I never knew how to actually build a business until I tried to sell my first one. And they were like, they were highly disappointed with the price that they got for their first business, because they thought it was worth so much more. But they were like, there were so many things that they didn't think about when they were building it that hurt them when it was time to sell it and exit.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot goes into selling a business, legally, valuations and all those things. It's not just a matter of, hey, you want to buy my business and here's a paper. There's a lot that goes into it. And people who buy businesses, that's the other side of it, that you have to be careful what you're buying, make sure all the paperwork's in line, because even from the tax side of it, okay, I bought a business. Okay, where's the bill of sale, or, the sale agreement? Where is the breakdown of the assets? Where's this? Oh, I don't know. They know nothing about the past, and you just kind of carry on that burden. So a lot to be said about buying and selling businesses, and just it comes down to the numbers at the end of the day. It comes down to your goals, your long-term plans, and your numbers, and your setup and your cleanup if needed. Make sense? Perfect. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close out and share, my information again, just as a recap. And then Terrell, definitely love for you to share a little more about your small business resources. So once again, this is Business Basics Friday, if you're just joining us, and we're here every Friday at 12 o'clock Eastern. Business Basics Friday is a session that we have guest speakers on to provide value to small business owners in different areas of services that they may provide. And as far as my background, I'm Safi Russell, founder and CEO of SDR Consulting, Inc. We are a virtual firm based in New York, but we work with clients all over, and we specialize in business startup and business cleanup services, as well as tax resolution for those who've gotten into trouble with the IRS estate. And you can contact us at SDR Consulting on social media or by phone at 516-255-6603 to set up your free 15-minute intro call. So Terrell, go ahead and close us out.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you all for joining in. And one of the final things that I'll say on everything is that building the business is it is a journey. There are steps in the process. You may feel like, hey, there's some of the stuff you said, Terrell, that I didn't do. And it's okay, because there are people here who can help with the cleanup. I mean, SDR Consulting can definitely help you with the cleanup and helping you kind of, fix what you may have skipped over. And so one of the things that we do at the TL Turner Group is we do bookkeeping and kind of CFO services. So kind of looking strategically forward, like once you've gotten it cleaned up, it's like, all right, now how do we manage it and how we continue to go forward? And if you you can contact us on our website is www.tlturnergroup.com. And there on the website, I mean, we have our link for the free resources. Like I said, we run multiple podcasts. We've done over 400 interviews in the last 20 months. I mean, where a lot of free insight and tips from successful entrepreneurs are there. We also have our service listings on the Entrepreneur Toolkit, as far as the different product offerings and services we have there to help you. Because at the end of the day, it's really about how do we help as many business owners really make finance and accounting less complicated so that they actually feel like they're making progress in their business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, with the last 2 years of everything going on with the pandemic, we're in January of 2022, there are a lot of new business owners, and good for them. They've either been forced into it or they kind of found value in what they do and now want to provide that value for themselves. So congratulations to you. Good luck on the journey, but definitely, get it done right. And so you can have that success and not be one of those statistics that everyone hears about. All right. So, Terrell, once again, it's been a pleasure. I want to thank you for taking the time out to meet with us today and share those years of wisdom, and definitely look forward to, staying connected in the future. All right.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Everyone have a great day and take care. Stay safe.